Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Hyperkin Retron SQ. I assume SQ stands for Square, and as you'll see when I open this up, it is definitely a Square little clone system. Now this is designed to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and also Game Boy Advance games, although it's very important to notice that they are saying in quotes, beta. And when I get to the gameplay footage, you'll know exactly what that means. And full disclosure, this was sent to me by Hyperkin for review. However, nobody is paying me to do this video and nobody's reviewing this video before it goes live. Now, it's important to know with this thing that there are two models or two color schemes that you can get with this. You'll see the blue one here, the blue and pink, but they also have a black and gold one, which I think looks pretty cool. And this retails for about $75. So let's go ahead and open up the Retron SQ, and you see that there is the unit right there. We're gonna go ahead and take a closer look at that in a moment. It comes with its own USB-C cable as well as a power adapter. I do like seeing power adapters with these things because that means it's all completely self-contained. You don't have to go looking for another one. In this box, you'll find the HDMI cable as well as the color matching USB Scout controller that they include with it. So this is a wired USB controller. Obviously, it's designed to look and function very similar to the Super Nintendo controller. And for the most part, actually, I really do like this controller. So it's great that they include it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the console itself. On the top is where you have the cartridge slot. So like I said, it will support Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. On the front, you have a power button, a reset button, and a USB port where you can plug in the controller. It's important to know that that controller actually has a 10-foot long cable, so it's plenty long for most people, I think. On the back is where you plug in the USB-C cable to give it power, and then below that it says memory. That's very important because that is where it comes with a micro SD card that has the firmware and I believe even the operating system, and that's how they'll do future firmware upgrades. Next to that is the HDMI out. You'll notice it's a full-size HDMI out, which is great. This outputs in 720p, and like I said, I'm gonna show you some gameplay footage here in a second. And then you have the aspect ratio switch. Now by default, it's set to 4:3. However, you can switch it to full screen or 16:9 if you wish. Now, it's important to know, we're going to get into it a little bit more later on, but neither of those aspect ratios are actually the ratios used when programming the original games. So there are some compromises being made here, and you can decide if that's important to you or not. And I want to say, I do really like the design of this. I think that's the reason why a lot of us got very excited when this was originally announced. It's small and compact, and I really like its translucent case. It reminds me of, those special edition N64s, as well as, of course, the iMacs, the original iMacs when they came out. It's just a cool feature. It feels very retro, and it feels appropriate, so it's cool they decided to do that. So I have a bunch of original Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and also Game Boy Advance games to throw at it, so let's dive in. All right, so the way that this thing works is when you first turn it on, it just sits at this Hyperkin logo until you pop in a game. So there isn't any menuing system. There isn't any options that you can bring up. There's no button combination on the controller to go in and change anything about this. So maybe they'll bring that to this device in the future, but for now, it is very simple. It just boots up to this screen and just waits for you. And then when you put a cartridge in, you get this loading screen. Now, this reminds me of the Retron 5 because it did something very similar. And basically, this only works with actual, physical, real games. So I believe what it's doing here is just ripping a copy of the game to work on its emulator. And the good news is you can still use your old save games. So you see Tetris DX here, and when I boot into it, I can still go in and access my old save games, which is awesome. And now let's go ahead and dive into the visuals here, because this is where I think some people are going to have to decide if this is the right device for them and if they're willing to put up with some of the compromises being made to bring this to the consumer at $75. The first thing I want to talk about is video quality. Now I mentioned that this outputs in 720p. You see Pokemon Red running here. And technically what's going on here is that my Elgato captured it at 720p, but then I am enlarging it for YouTube to 1080p. But you can see that the picture is decent, but it is a little soft. And then I want to compare it to, say, if you were running it on the GameCube Game Boy player with the HDMI out on that. And actually, they look very similar. And so I think that's okay. That's a good thing, right? But there are going to be a lot of people in the comments who are going to be like, yeah, but this isn't the best that you can do. And they're right. I mean, I've reviewed on my channel some devices like the GBA Consolizer. So you see it here, and when you go back and forth between that, well, I mean, the difference is night and day. But the GBA Consolizer is a much more complex product. It's also more expensive. And a lot of people are also going to say, well, what about, FPGA devices, some of those types of things? And the answer is, yeah, you probably would get a much clearer, more accurate, higher resolution picture out of something like that. But again, the likelihood of you being able to get that at $75 with a controller is pretty unlikely. And so again, I just want to bring that up because I know it's going to be a topic of discussion in the comments, and it's legit. It all depends on what you really want and how much you want to pay. And then the other thing I want to mention is the compromises they've made to the aspect ratio. And you can definitely see that here when I put side-by-side Tetris running on the GameCube Game Boy player versus the Retron SQ. And so they are definitely stretching that original picture, that original screen, to be quote unquote 4:3. It's not great. It'd be nice if there was a little bit more accuracy in this product, but whether that's a big deal to you, that's going to be a personal thing. Now, I did run into something a little weird, and I'm not quite sure what's going on with it. So I threw a bunch of original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games at this, and for the most part, actually, it ran all of them just fine. However, for some reason, it wouldn't run Yoshi, or actually it would run the game, but then for whatever reason, it would not start a game. It's the only one I found that did this, where I'm sitting there hitting that start button on the controller. Actually, I hit every button combination possible, and it would not start the game. So I don't know what's going on with this game. Every other game I threw at it worked just fine. I assume it's something that can probably be fixed with a firmware upgrade, but I just wanted you to know. Now, you're probably noticing that it's using colors when running original Game Boy games. That's a very common thing to do, with emulators and different devices. It would be cool if you could customize those, because you can't actually with this. And so I'm one of those guys who actually kind of likes to run original Game Boy games in black and white, or, a shade of green. That kind of feels more authentic to me. And sometimes the colors in some of these original games just looks kind of weird. It's not a big deal, but it would be cool if it gave you that option. And so I happen to have one Japanese import game, so I threw in the Japanese version of Mario Golf in there, and thankfully it ran it just fine. So that's a really cool option too. So you're probably wondering at this point why I haven't talked about Game Boy Advance games yet. Well, the answer to that is because they don't really work, and it's a complete bummer. Now, I was curious when I first saw this announced, and when I even got the box, it said beta on it. I was like, that's kind of weird. Why would you put the word beta on something that you're going to be selling for months, if not years into the future? But now I know why. It's because every Game Boy Advance game that I threw at it would load, but they ran terribly. As you can see here, this is Moto Racer for the Game Boy Advance, and it's running, but the performance is just, it's terrible. It's almost unplayable. And for a refresher, here's what the game should run like. So this is again running on the GameCube Game Boy player. So it's a really fast game. It's got a high frame rate, but then you switch over to the Retron SQ, and yeah, it's really struggling. Again, it's playing the game, but not very well. Same thing with Metroid Zero Mission. Again, the game is running, but it's running pretty bad. And I was kind of surprised by this. I was surprised because Hyperkin has had this working before. If you've had the Retron 5 like I have for years, well, Game Boy Advance support on that has been flawless. I mean, it's been working on that for, like I said, years now. And the issue here is that they're not using the same software. So in the past on the Retron 5, there was some controversy about what emulators they were running. I don't know all the specifics of that. You know, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not paying attention to that. But I do know for this particular product, in the manual and in the marketing material, they've been very adamant about saying that this is open source. And so I think that's what's going on here, that they're basically having to build it up from the ground. And this is different hardware, obviously. I mean, it's not the Retron 5. And so that's a huge bummer for me, because as much as I like original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, honestly, I go back and play Game Boy Advance games way more often. So for me, with this device as it sits right now, I personally, I wouldn't use this very often. And if you're somebody out there who already owns a Retron 5, there is no reason to own this, really. I mean, other than the form factor, if that's what you're really into, but not having rock solid, awesome Game Boy Advance support, it's kind of a deal killer for me. And while I'm mentioning it, you know, one of the nice things about the Retron 5 is that it just has more features. So on the Retron 5, you can actually do save states, right? You can save anywhere and come back to it. You don't have to worry about saving within the game. Now, the flip side is the Retron 5 is $160. So it's, you know, over twice as much as this. But again, the Retron 5 has more features when it comes to the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, and it also plays all of, you know, the NES, the Super NES, the Genesis games. So yeah. And then finally, I was curious if it would run the EverDrive, and it doesn't. And that's okay, because they've been very clear on all of their systems that they don't officially support EverDrives. They're all about people who want to run the actual physical games, but I thought I'd try it. As far as sound goes and the accuracy of it, I A/B tested between the Retron SQ and the Game Boy player on the GameCube, kind of going back and forth between Zelda and also Pokemon Red, and I didn't really hear any difference to my ears. Now, maybe there's something in a particular game somewhere that's doing something a little bit weird, but for the most part, I was able to go back and forth, and it seemed pretty accurate. I guess the one thing that I did notice is that the volume level appears to be a little bit lower on the Retron device as compared to, you know, the Game Boy player. So I don't think that's necessarily a big deal. You know, you can obviously just adjust it on your stereo, but I just want to mention it. So my final thoughts on the Hyperkin Retron SQ. If you can't tell already in this video, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It really comes down to what you want for your $75. If you are a game collector out there that's got a big original Game Boy and Game Boy Color collection, and you're looking for a relatively inexpensive solution out there, you're okay with some of the compromises being made to the video quality and the aspect ratio, then this might be a solution for you. I mean, I like its physical design. I think it's a really cool looking device. And I guess for me, at the end of the day, not having really good Game Boy Advance support is kind of a deal killer for me. Now, you know, they've said they're going to continue to support this. They're going to do firmware updates. They're probably going to make that better. And, you know, there's no indication that they won't. But it is kind of weird that they would send these out for review, and they're going to be selling them very quickly. You know, very soon, these are going to be on shelves. And so, you know, I think that needs to be there if it's going to be a product that a lot of people are going to be excited about. Now, if you want to learn more about this, I'll put links down in the video description below. I know at the very least they're going to be selling these on Amazon, and I'm sure a lot of other retailers are going to be picking this up as well, because it's pretty easy to find some of the Hyperkin products. So anyways, guys, love to know what you think about this so far. Did you pre-order it? Are you excited for it? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.